Hello, Internet! Welcome to episode 187 of the Assorted Calibers podcast, the Second Amendment podcast. There's a little bit for everyone. I'm Weird Beard, and with me, as always, is the loveliest hostess in the entire world, Erin Paulette. How you doing, Erin?
You did more of your porn voice there.
I never know which way it's gonna go.
Title your sex tape.
It's like jazz. It's all improvising.
I'm doing fine. Perhaps a better question is, how are you doing, Weird? You apparently needed a week off to rest and recharge. So, are you all refueled and ready to rock it?
I am doing much better. Yeah, it's my household. Without diving into too much personal stuff, I will just lightly say my household has come down with a case of the grumpies that I blame on the fact that the sun just doesn't come up anymore. And we are encased in ice, quite literally. We had a massive ice storm, and after it stopped, I went outside to shovel it, and I went, Dad, this isn't moving. This is just white concrete. Okay. So I broke out the garden trowel and busted up the berm that was created by the plow, just so the vehicles could drive out, and we're just driving over a skating rink until the weather gets nicer.
That's totally going to be my adult film star name for you. White concrete.
You are not a nice person, and I love every second of it.
Yeah.
So is there anything new in the land of not white concrete?
Well, yes, there is. And I almost feel like there might be a pivot if I reached for it, or a segue, but I'm not. I'm just going to let it stand on its own merits. So back in January, which really wasn't that long ago, I was approached by a reporter for the, I don't know, can you really call it a newspaper if they don't have papers? I don't know. It was one I've never heard of before. It's called the New Boston Post.
Mm-hmm.
And they wanted me to comment on the fact that Massachusetts Attorney General Shannon Liss-Riordan, she is now campaigning for governor, and she is calling to repeal the Second Amendment. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, yes, I will be so very happy to give you a comment. And, I cracked my knuckles. It's like, all right, I got this. Let's go. And here's what I said. Out of 50 states in this country, 21 of them have passed constitutional carry for their residents. In order to repeal the Second Amendment, 3/4 of the states must ratify the repeal. 75% of 50 means 38 states must ratify. Yet 50 minus the 21 with constitutional carry leaves only 29. Ms. Liss-Riordan's plan lacks the numbers to succeed, which is something a state attorney general ought to know. This is simply pandering to a voter base and nothing more. And so I sent that in, and I didn't know if it was going to be used. And it was, because apparently the New Boston Post is a conservative publication. We'll call it that. And so I was very pleased to see that. You can follow the link and see for yourself. It's behind a wall. You don't have to pay for the first 3 issues, but they're going to harvest your email address. But, if all you care about is what I said, there, you got it for free. And so I did a little bit of following up on this, and I wrote about it in my blog. So you've got it written down if you want to. What really amuses me about this entire situation is that this is not the first time that Liss-Riordan has done this. In fact, back in 2020, she was running for a spot in the U.S. Senate. And Maura Healey.
Oh, Mara.
And everyone should know who she is. She's the Massachusetts Attorney General, whose gun policy boils down to, I'm not going to tell you if your AR-15 is legal or not. You'll find out when I arrest you. Yeah, so you remember her? Her very own political consultant bashed this same concept of let's repeal the Second Amendment. And he said it was, quote, a new low bar for primary voter pandering with ideas going nowhere, unquote. And so, when the very anti-gun Mara Healey and her political consultant, the one who's feeding her these lines, is basically saying, yeah, it's pandering and it's not going to go anywhere, that's a burn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's... Boy, I mean, it's... You're so correct on the numbers. And first up, I will step back and say, as I always say, I praise anti-gun activists and politicians who talk about repealing the Second Amendment, because that is legitimately them being honest. Because all of the nonsense that is being done by the anti-gun groups, I would argue, in my opinion, but it doesn't necessarily need to be my opinion, because I can read, is patently anti-constitutional and just illegal in itself. And the only way to pass any gun control laws is first to repeal the Second Amendment. But they can't do that because we just don't have the votes. We would have done it years ago if they had the votes. We would have done it in the 90s when gun control was the most popular it had ever been in the history of this country. And,
when they passed the assault weapons ban.
Yeah, correct.
And in fact, I remember watching, and I found it once on YouTube, and then I haven't been able to find it again. But I know for a fact that Dianne Feinstein, I don't remember, she was on 60 Minutes. Mm-hmm. And she said the only reason that that she did the assault weapons ban as opposed to a repeal of the Second Amendment or whatever is because she didn't have the votes. Mm-hmm. And she said quite plainly that if she had the votes, she would have done something far, far more than just the AWB. And one of the things she said was, Mr. and Mrs. America, turn in your guns.
Literally turn them all in. It is a widely quoted text. I haven't seen the video for it either, but it's absolutely been something on the back burner. But they also knew that they have never had it, and so it is the correct course of action. No, you can't pass any of this gun control crap without repealing the Second Amendment. So I appreciate your honesty, but at the same time, dishonesty seems to rule because we're letting this crap fly. So here we are. But yeah.
Okay, so I have to admit, I misspoke. I said she was running for governor. That's my bad. She's running for attorney general. Still, mm-hmm. She should know this.
It's honest confusion because Mara May is running for governor currently.
You know what? I'm going to go with that explanation. I had confused the one who is AG and the one who wants to be AG, and yeah, we'll go with that. Mm-hmm. So do you think Mara Healey's going to win?
I don't know. It's a little bit too early. She is right now listed as the front runner for governor. She's the Democrat candidate, which does have the advantage, though not that great of an advantage because overall Republicans tend to become governor of Massachusetts as often as not. As a matter of fact, since I've lived down here, we've had more Republicans been in charge of the state more. They tend to alternate back and forth. Of course, also, it is very, very squishy, very, very anti-freedom Republicans.
I was about to say, just being a Republican does not mean that you are pro-Second Amendment. Cough, cough, Miami cough.
Yes, yeah. I will say that the best Second Amendment governor, as far as how things have gone in here, has been Democrat Deval Patrick. He was rabidly anti-Second Amendment and demanded gun control, but the Gun Owners Action League managed to get quite a few footholds while he was governor. But so the Republicans tend to be just as anti-gun as the Democrats that run. So I don't know. I don't know what's going on. I will say that the I don't know how he stands on the Second Amendment, but the Republican front runner right now seems to be a much more hardline conservative. He's very much he's made his way up through the legislature as a tax cutter, and something tells me that's not going to fly here in Massachusetts. So it very well could be. I mean, Maura Healey's essentially one of the first big name candidates to throw her hat in the ring, so it could be that she might burn out early. That is frequently known to happen in most political campaigns. So again, it's too early to tell. Right now, her odds are looking very good, but I would not put money on it at this point. So you know what? I'm gonna pivot. I'm gonna segue. We talk about states with the constitutional carry. There is a thing. This was found by a friend of the show, Beth Alcazar, the very lovely Beth Alcazar. But she found a series of posts from, I believe it's the Alabama Sheriff's Association. They have put out a series of ads. I'm only seeing this on Facebook, and that's where I've got the links to. That is anti-constitutional carry, and let's see how they do have a link.
So I'm going to promote myself here. Weird only saw this because I saw it, and one of the slides was Maine, and I showed it to him.
Yep.
And the slide for Maine is interesting because it says 9 deaths and then 6%. And then at the bottom, after Maine passed permitless carry, it saw a 6% increase in gun deaths. Okay, you've already heard my rant about gun deaths. Just consider that already made. All right, so a 6% increase, and the increased total was 9. 9 minus 6% is 8.46. So that's half a person? How do you kill half a person? How are they calculating that? And that increase, I mean, that's not truly an increase. That's statistical noise. That's within the margin of error. And so I don't know about any of the other ones because I just saw this and fixated on it. But this is a perfect example of using scary-looking numbers to influence people, but completely falls apart when confronted with any sort of reason and logic.
Correct. And a ton of these. I'm getting to Idaho is 79 deaths. I think Maine is the only one. Oh, Alaska is 55 deaths. But Alaska's been constitutional carry since the 90s. So, I mean, it's one of those, like, I'm not really clear on their methodology. What's going on here? Oh, South Dakota, 7 deaths. And again,
yeah, South Dakota's another one. It's literally less than half.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I'm not a math person. When I'm pointing these things out, there's a problem.
And furthermore, as you pointed out, it is, increase in gun deaths after permitless carry was increased. Well, what's the what's the methodology you're using here? Because I'm pretty sure that's just suicide deaths, because that's always 66% of all firearms death in the United States is almost exclusively suicide deaths. And actually, who knows it during the pandemic years, I know that suicide has been up. I can only imagine that firearms have taken their fair share of that many lives. And so, and I'm looking at the website. The only thing that they list is the CDC, and only thing they list is the CDC, and they're just going by its raw firearms mortality. And so I don't really get what they're trying to say, especially since, permitless carry is a way bigger deal. You could argue just raw gun death numbers if, say, you were doing something like repealing a ban on handguns, let's say, where a huge portion of firearms are just not allowed in this state. or repeal of like a firearms roster like Massachusetts has, where like there's huge amounts of firearms that, Aaron, you could buy if you could just walk into your local gun store and pick them up if they've got it in stock. And I no way, no how can get it without some very, very creative acts. And so just going off of just these raw numbers, it's just, it just doesn't make sense, no matter what. Cause like, is this, untrained concealed, is this wrongful deaths because of concealed carry? Is this shootouts on the street? Or
well, here I can actually do you one better.
Okay,
how many of these are justified homicides, i.e. legitimate uses of self-defense?
Yeah.
And one, okay, you and I would argue, I'm sure some people would argue against it, but you and I are definitely in favor of self-defense homicides.
Mm-hmm.
It is better to kill the bad guy who is doing the threatening than to have the threatened victim killed. And that could be part of the increase.
Yep.
And you and I think that's a good thing. And I think most gun owners would say that it's a good thing. But not according to these people.
That's one of the arguments for why I like constitutional carry is it removes the barrier of entry into it, so that it's not you have to scrape together the money to get it, or you have to go book a course. And oh my God, these days with like COVID restrictions and just the amount of people out there and all that, you could be waiting 6 or 7 months just to take a class before you can apply for your permit, and there's huge delays and all that. And meanwhile, now it's just one of those, like, get yourself a good holster. I recommend getting some training, but you don't necessarily need to go book a class. You could go, talk to some friends. You could go, bum around the gun shop a little bit and see if anybody's, willing to log some range time. You could go to Operation Blazing Sword and look up a trainer near you, and find someone who's willing to take you to the range and give you some instructions and give you some insight.
Or find a Pink Pistols chapter. Same sort of thing.
Correct. And let's be honest. I mean, I always point out you look at the NRA magazines, publishes the what is it? The armed self-defense. I forget what the name of the title is, but they've always got the self-defense story. It's at the front of all their magazines. And if you look, most of the time, it's not someone highly trained with some whiz-bang gun. It's just a regular person. And so it's not like you need all the training in the world to be effective. It may help, and it may make things work out better for you, in the end. But at the same time, it's not like states that don't have a mandatory training requirement have all sorts of wrongful deaths and such shootings where someone is claiming self-defense and they thought they did it right, or accidental deaths where they were carrying their gun and they shot themselves in the leg or something like that. It's just it doesn't happen. Like, the evidence that we need more training just don't exist in the in the statistical records. So getting people out there with the guns means that they can be there to defend themselves. And, the data shows that about 90% of self-defensive gun uses, no shots are fired. But the more
newsflash, people don't want to be shot. If you show them a gun, most of them are going to run away.
Mm-hmm. But then, would people show like the raw numbers of the number of people shot in the United States and go, oh, look at this. And, meanwhile, in the UK, we've only had this many people shot. Well, the United States has got like so much more population than you. Sorry, we're rolling the dice a whole lot more. The more people out there carrying, absolutely, the chances of bad people catching bullets goes way up, and especially with these like goofy small numbers. So yeah, this is bogus, and I gotta say, a lot of people are they're getting dragged in Facebook. I clicked over Beth has the link to the actual post done by the sheriff's group, and they are getting dragged in the comments, and good for them. Like, I'm not seeing anybody supporting this as being a reasonable or logical campaign. which also goes well for Arkansas getting their constitutional carry, I would hope. Best wishes to them. And I lost my train of thought. But yeah, this is, oh yes, the common thread that seems to be going on here is that these guys are getting addicted to that nice little pat of cash that they're getting from every little permit, every little poll tax that they're taking for your mother may I permission slip. So pivoting again towards police malfeasance, I really wanted to speak out against this really tragic event that happened in Minneapolis. And that is a man named Amir Locke was shot and killed by the Minneapolis police in his apartment. And did you by chance see this the badge cam video that was released?
I did not. I'm trying to keep my blood pressure low. But I know that it was a no-knock raid, and they knocked the door down, and they announced, police, this, we got a warrant, get down on the ground. And Amir Locke was sleeping on his sofa. And so imagine, you're in your house where you're supposed to be safe, and you awake to the sound of people kicking your door down and yelling at you, and you've got seconds to make the right decision. And I don't know how you are, Weird, because you're one of those annoying morning people, but for me, when I'm woken from a sound sleep, I need about 30 seconds just to remember how to be human. And this man, who I don't know why he had a gun with him. I mean, it was his gun. It was legal. I'm not going to diss anyone. Perhaps he had concerns about someone breaking into his house the way it just happened. But woken from a sound sleep to someone breaking in and shouting at him. And he unfortunately made the wrong decision of bringing the gun to bear on the people who had entered his apartment. And the police shot him dead. And reading that, I decided I really don't need to watch the video. Now, if there's something in there you think I need, I'm sure you'll tell me about it.
No, I will say in the article that I have linked, they picked the one frame where you can clearly see the gun. I must say I watched one video of it where it actually played it out in like double time or half time. So it was very slow motion. And even in that one, I did not see the gun. It's like literally in one frame. And like I said, this is the one, there was at least 7 officers that were on this raid. And so there's a whole bunch of badge cam footage out there, I would assume. I wouldn't think it would be just one officer with a badge cam. And so, and it doesn't appear that the badge cam that we've got is the officer who actually fatally shot Mr. Locke. But I think that this was the one badge cam where it made them look the best, because this is the one badge cam that was released by Minneapolis. And I gotta say, well, first up, you ask, I don't know why he was, sleeping with a gun on it's essentially like an ottoman beside the couch, and he had I believe it's a Ruger 57 from the accounts, but as far as I know, I don't think the police have officially come out and admitted that they had the wrong apartment, but specifically, Amir Locke was not listed on this warrant. They were not serving this warrant to arrest him or gather evidence against him. They were. It doesn't say what they were doing on it. I actually haven't looked at it just before the show started because you asked the question. I actually nodded off. Woke up. Oh crap! I got to get going. So, but yes.
Did they at least have the right apartment?
I don't know. I don't think so. That's where I'm leading. I could be wrong. They're being fairly close-lipped about it. But given that, he was there and he was shot, and I guess we don't.
He was killed. Let's not bury the lead. Yeah. He was killed and he did nothing wrong.
Correct. So I would argue that you said made the wrong choice. I don't know. because
Well, I mean, he made the wrong choice in that it killed him. I mean, it wasn't legally the wrong choice. There was a ruling, I think it was last year in Texas, where there was a no-knock warrant, and somebody actually shot and hit a police officer, and the jury said, nope, it was fine. He didn't know you were cops. You did this no-knock warrant thing. He was in fear for his life. Nope, he's not guilty. And we need more of those, of course. And I'm going to restrain the urge to get on a soapbox here. But we need to get rid of this qualified immunity garbage that police... Well, we also need to get rid of no-knock warrants, because they are a relic of the drug war, back when, oh no, we've got to do this so that they don't flush the drugs. And these days, we've got ways to, stop the thing from flushing, cut off the water, whatever. And honestly, I can't think of any situation why you would need a no-knock warrant. I mean, if you're going to go no-knock, this needs to be something like a hostage situation, in which case you don't have a warrant because it's a developing situation and you've got to go in and save lives. So yeah, just get rid of no-knock warrants because they're crap and they lead to people being hurt. And then, yeah, I don't have a good idea for what to replace it with, but like some people have said, if something is on fire, you don't need to replace the fire, you need to put it out. And I think that qualified immunity is a fire that needs to be put out. And I don't know, maybe have police officers carry insurance or something, like the way doctors do for malpractice. I'm just saying that if they had to answer painfully for a lot of these situations, there would be a sharp increase in discretion used by the officers. So that's my little mini soapbox rant.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you on that. So, I mean, it's just, yeah, it shouldn't be done. I mean, worst case scenario, if you're worried that by knocking on the door, the person's going to arm up and shoot through the door and all that, fine. Knock on the door around a riot shield and have all the cops behind the beside the door frame so that they can't get shot through, and have everyone armored up. But yeah, there's nothing, if there's enough evidence in there that can be destroyed in the time it takes for someone to get to the door and go through and look at a warrant, then there's not enough evidence to be collected, in my opinion. I just don't see the point. If they're dealing with kilos and kilos and kilos of illegal drugs, and of course I'm for ending the drug war anyway, but if there is kilos there, you're not going to flush it and you're not going to burn it. And so, yeah, there's just no reason for this. Because again, this guy was fast asleep and wrapped up in a blanket. The cops keyed into his apartment and announced their presence as soon as they were inside, and they were yelling police, police. I don't even know if they were really yelling police. Yeah, they were yelling police. But hey, guess what? Lots of people can do that. And there absolutely have been documented cases of home invaders yelling police, police, when entering in a home, or even dressing up as police officers as a means to kidnap people and get their compliance. So just having that there is not really a whole lot of comfort, because, hey, look, I just said police, police a bunch of times, and I am not a sworn peace officer, but geez, my tongue still works. So this is true. And even under the assumption that they got the wrong apartment, that means that the right apartment was somewhere, and them doing this warrant implies that it was a dangerous suspect that they were going after. So yeah, if he's living in an apartment building with drug dealers and gangbangers and other such unsavory folks, I don't blame him for sleeping with a gun beside him. So I just wanted to bring this up for ACP, just because there are times when we are speaking out in favor of the police when we feel that they're being treated unfairly. And the Assorted Calibers podcast is not an anti-police group whatsoever, and we do not stand for defund the police. I think that is a absolutely worthless endeavor and will cause more harm than good. But at the same time, we are also not back the blue because police are but human beings and we are all flawed. And this appears to be a very dirty shoot.
I'm really not sure how it could be much dirtier.
I mean, it could be dirtier if, in fact, they were saying gun, 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 and he had he grabbed a glass of water or something. I mean, that's the only way it could have been better. It could have been worse. Is he did in fact have a tool for which he could have enacted deadly force on those officers, but also at the same time they scared the bejesus out of him by crashing into his apartment, and so I and waking him up out of a dead sleep. So I can't blame them on this. And actually, interesting story that just popped into my head is actually a cousin of mine was a Portland police officer, and he actually talked about going on drug raids, and they actually would go through and they would go in quiet. They would key into the building and go in quiet and secure the area and essentially wake the people up and made sure that they did not have any guns or things around them and quickly took them into custody. I don't know how easy or difficult that would be, but that was definitely the story of, he talked about going into an apartment and they're asleep on the couch or in their bed and just wake them up. Hello, police. But yeah, it is a dirty shoot. A whole bunch of other people have spoken out in favor of it. Unfortunately, I've heard some people speaking out say, "Good." I did hear a radio station say, "Oh, he had this, this high capacity weapon. It was a Ruger 57, so it's like a 20-round magazine in the gun." And saying, "Oh, this was, he could have used that against those officers." Well, he could have, but as far as I know, he was not the man that they were looking for. So why were they rolling up on him? So we will see. There will be a lot more information on this going forward, I hope. And actually, another case, you're mentioning the Texas case that, I heard that exact case too. I can't recall the name of the defendant in that, but an even more high profile case, which has been getting a good leaving alone, unfortunately, because the instigators that run our media have been leaving alone. But the shooting of Breonna Taylor, the police were serving the warrant. I believe Breonna Taylor's boyfriend is a convicted felon and therefore illegally owned his firearm. And there certainly is quite a bit of evidence that I saw that Breonna Taylor might have been involved in the drug trade. I'm not saying that she is directly, but I certainly have seen enough that a warrant doesn't seem like a bad idea on them searching. And when they made entry, I believe the accounts are they did knock, but they were on the other side of the apartment, so it is very possible that they did not hear them. And when they made entry, he fired upon the officers, and essentially the courts did not charge the boyfriend who shot one of the officers. They also did not charge the officer who killed Breonna Taylor because the understanding was that the officer was being fired upon while he was serving a lawful warrant, and this was the right apartment that they had entered, and they did have a warrant for that entry. So a police officer in the course of their duties and he is being shot at, it is not unreasonable for the officer to return fire. But see also the apartment owner is having his apartment breached. It is not unreasonable for him, not knowing that they're officers, to fire upon any intruders that are in his home. And one officer was charged because he had, I believe, fired through a wall. But essentially used some very, very bad tactics, and that was considered endangering to the people who lived in the apartments, and was not directly returning fire. So that was how that went through. So again, it is not against the law or bad to fire upon officers who are making a search warrant, especially if you don't know that they're officers or are not aware that they have a lawful warrant, which is another reason to get rid of no-knock warrants. Show them the piece of paper. Let them know we can legally come in here and search the place. Please, please comply.
So Weird, speaking of compliance, or lack thereof, it has come to my attention, and the website that reports it seems a little sketchy. I've never heard of America's Freedom Fighters before, but they link to an article by the U.S. Government Accountability Office, and it's on a .gov website. And this goes back to 2016, and shock, surprise, horror. The ATF did not always comply with the Appropriations Act restrictions and should better adhere to its policies. So what that means is, very simply, because I know you're going to get into the weeds on this one, there are federal regulations against the ATF having a searchable digital database on firearms and firearm owners. They are specifically prohibited from doing that. And that's one reason why bound books exist, and why when a firearm is used in a crime, they need to track it back to the store where it was sold, and the ATF will investigate the dealer's bound books and so on and so forth. And the U.S. government investigated and found another branch of the U.S. government did not comply with these regulations. And this was back in 2016, and nothing really has happened.
And I just wanted to put this in mostly for all the talk of, and we'll get a little bit more into this as the show goes on, into the talk of universal background checks, which would be, of course, to force all, in the Bloomberg sense of the word, force all sales to go through FFLs. If you want a gun, you go to a gun shop. If you want to sell a gun to someone you know, you both go into a gun shop and you make the transfer there. And so the gun appears on their bound book, and it has your name, the buyer's name, and the make, model, and serial number of the firearm. And I always point out that, number one, that's a pain in the butt. Why involve a third person who you have to pay them for their time to do something that you can easily do yourself? But also, it is a super duper easy way to get a backdoor registry. Furthermore, if a gun is in your possession and it is not in this backdoor registry, it is de facto illegal, because how did you get it? Especially once you get to the point where, all of the people who legally owned guns before the passing of universal background checks now have all passed away. So it's a dirty thing. And one thing I always hear when talking about this with anti-gunners is, but that's not true, because the federal government is banned from ever having or using a gun registry. And
we all trust the government, don't we?
Yeah, and to tie it back to our first story, the government's also banned from doing any gun control whatsoever by letter of the law, and they don't care. So yet another reason just to fight back tooth and nail against all gun control, no matter how small, because not only can these laws be used against us as they are written, but it also shows that really the government knows no limit to how much they will abuse their powers.
Louder for the people in the back. All right, so speaking of the government getting things wrong, this just in: care workers neglect rambling old man. Wait, I'm sorry. That should be Biden talks out his butt about guns.
So I saw Joe Biden's press conference on gun violence, and this clip was just ripe for a Fisk.
We want to crack down on the flow of firearms used to commit violence. That includes taking on and shutting down rogue gun dealers.
I have zero issues with shutting down FFLs who violate the law. But meanwhile, I've heard of gun dealers getting their license revoked for making simple clerical errors. And I've heard of countless gun dealers going under fire because guns they sold were stolen and used in crime. This is not rogue gun dealing.
It's about doing background checks, as well as outright selling, making sure that people who are not allowed to have a gun don't get the gun in the first place.
First, I must mention the obvious cognitive decline of our president. He's been giving speeches publicly since the 1970s, and all of a sudden he can't do it anymore? This is a major concern all of us should have, especially when he's talking about people's lives. Speaking of which, background checks are the law, and they are designed to prevent prohibited persons from getting a gun. He might be talking about broadening background checks, as he has in the past, or maybe he's talking about expanding what makes somebody a prohibited person. Or maybe he's just an old man with dementia. I have no idea, but he's talking, and he's talking from a place of authority.
For any of the press listening, this doesn't violate anybody's Second Amendment right. There's no violation of a Second Amendment right. We talk like there's no amendment that's absolute. When the amendment was passed, it didn't say anybody can own a gun and any kind of gun and any kind of weapon. You couldn't buy a cannon, and when this amendment was passed, and so no reason why you should be able to buy certain assault weapons. But that's another issue.
Point 1. Yes, it does. I've noted that the federal government could be weaponized against gun dealers. How is this legal? Point 2. No right is absolute. But those limits come when they violate the rights of others. I have the right to speak freely until I slander somebody. I have the right to be secure in my home and property until a judge believes there's a reasonable suspicion that a crime has been or is being committed and issues a warrant. As far as I'm concerned, you have the right to own and carry any gun you wish, and that right only ends when you threaten to or directly harm another person without justification. Point 3. Yes, you could buy a cannon in the 1790s. You can still buy one today. They've never been illegal under U.S. law in the history of this nation, or even in the years before our independence. You could even own one as a convicted felon. Check the show notes for a High Caliber Histories video where Logan shreds President Biden on this. Point 4. He isn't talking about assault weapons today, but he mentioned them because he's going to be talking about them again. He wants to take your guns. Make no mistake about it. And he cares about as much about the U.S. Constitution as he cares about fact-checking his speeches.
One of the things that we focused on, the Attorney General and I, and we're getting to the point where I think we're going to be able to have a real impact on it, includes going after ghost guns. Ghost guns are the guns everyone in this room knows that can be purchased in parts, assembled at home, no serial number, and can't be traced. And they're as deadly as any other weapon out there.
No, ghost guns are not assembled at home. They need to be built at home and then assembled. In fact, the law states you can't go over to your buddy's house and have him mill out the receiver because that would be illegal. And they can't be traced is fear-mongering. Unless you buy an 80% kit from a gun show with cash, you'll probably leave a paper trail. And more of a paper trail than when you just bought a bunch of plumbing fixtures at the hardware store. Because you can make a functional gun that way too.
This spring, the Justice Department will issue a final rule to regulate these so-called ghost guns.
Good luck with that. The real name for ghost guns is 80% kits, and they're called that because the guns are 80% finished, and the end user must legally do the last 20% of a functional and homemade firearm. Except this is all kind of an urban legend. There's no such thing as 80%. It's just an industry word for gun not finished enough. And there are no guidelines for what makes X lump of plastic just plastic and Y lump a legal firearm. Except the ATF has said that X lump is indeed a lump, and if the Justice Department makes a ruling, then they could be defining what 80% is. And therefore, we would have a concrete 79% where people could just start casting frames without needing to worry about the ATF. I mean, it's not like Facts and Firearms needs the ATF approval when they make a new barrel design.
If you commit a crime with a ghost gun, not only are state and local prosecutors going to come after you, but expect federal charges and federal prosecution as well.
All I could think of with this is all the calls for federal hate crime charges to be filed whenever there's a racially charged crime. I keep hearing the threat, but I never see the charges. Let's hope this entire Biden agenda is just as hollow. Those are your anti-gun talking points and a few rebuttals to combat them.
Yeah, that's painful for me to listen to because, as I've said before, I have a father who has a degenerative brain disease. Mm-hmm. He's got Parkinson's, and I don't know if the dementia is the result of Parkinson's, if it's just alongside it, but he definitely has declining mental faculties. And I hear it when he talks a lot of times, and he will lose the thread, he will ramble, and Biden's got that, but worse. And my father's like 85 now. So I don't recall how old Biden is. I think he's younger than that, but not by a whole lot.
I think he's his next birthday, he'll be turning 80.
Yeah. So I really don't want to dwell on this, but this is not a well man, and he shouldn't be speaking in public, let alone steering the ship of state.
Yeah, and as I said, this is a man who, like him or hate him, I think my opinion of him should be pretty well known, but he's a lifelong politician. He's been a politician since he was a relatively young man. I think he was actually one of the youngest men in the Senate for a while, and now he's 80. And so this guy has a well-documented career of public speaking, and now just suddenly have him be reading prepared remarks like this, there's really no denying that something's he's losing a lot off his fastball. Mm-hmm. But then also he's totally wrong. I mean, just about everything, and it's just we will see how these are going to go through, as far as how much are going to be, if there's going to be any executive orders. I mean, honestly speaking, it seems like it's like every 4 or 5 months he's making another speech on gun violence and then doing nothing. So we'll see what happens. I certainly heard a report this morning talking about this task force that he's creating on gun violence, that maybe, just maybe, it's not really going to be a legal task force as much as it's going to be a nice opportunity for nieces and nephews and cousins and brothers-in-laws to get some no-show coat holder jobs.
My thoughts on the subject are they are waiting to see how the midterms sort out before they do anything. Right now, they're saying all the right things, but as we've observed countless times, as a result of the COVID lockdown and the subsequent failure of rule of law in a lot of cities, there are a lot of people who would normally not have guns who now own guns, and they don't want them taken away. And that's why no one said peep about guns in the 2020 election. And there's been a lot of talk, and you've said, and I agree with you at this point, that a lot of it is just throwing meat to a certain fan base in order to keep their support, but no one's going to do it because gun control is the third rail. And I think they're waiting to see how the midterms sort out before they commit to anything. So Biden will say things, but I don't think anything's going to happen until after the election.
Mm-hmm. And certainly with the fact that the gun shops are empty and ammo is extremely expensive and hard to find because there's a whole bunch of new gun owners, and not all those gun owners are Republicans. And so there very well may have been people that were firmly in the camp of people like Biden and the people that Biden is going to endorse in this next election. And so this really is showing the increasing bipartisan nature of the Second Amendment. So one thing I try to do very hard in ACP is to talk about Second Amendment politics without getting partisan. And Xander's here to give his independent thoughts on that very issue.
Welcome to Independent Thoughts with yours truly, Xander Opal. One of the things that drew me into this corner of the firearms community is how welcoming folks are. Another is the lack of mean-spirited politics-based comments on large groups of people. Doing that is an unprofessional thing if one is trying to deliver a professional product. It is unnecessary and rapidly becomes detrimental as it drives people away. To pick a non-random example, the hosts of a podcast on cyber-related items would frequently make digs at one particular political group. A pity. The information was good, but the nastiness left a bad taste in my mouth. I didn't want to put that kind of thought process in my brain. It is something I've been working on for some time, to not get into bad habits of thought to the point where I'm thoughtlessly bashing people and not realizing the muck I'm splattering on those nearby. If I cut someone down, I want to be precise and accurate and able to back it up with well-reasoned logic such that even people who don't agree with me can nod and be able to acknowledge I have a point. Speaking of points, allow me to move a little closer to the reason of this podcast. As we have seen demonstrated in the last few years, Americans resent being constrained. Whether it be based on race, gender, orientation, or public health degrees of debatable, elsewhere than this forum, value. Telling the public that people can't be allowed to have something causes a large group of said people to get that thing. We also resent being punished for the actions of another. This is in the legal sense, such as attempts to ban firearms that are often completely unrelated to a precipitating crime, or in the social sense, such as the belittlement I mentioned a couple minutes ago. That last constraint is about guaranteed to drive people away, either immediately or through growing disgust. Anti-gunners harp on how horrible gun owners are, thinking of armed people as those people, and yet they are blind to how much like them in other ways armed people are. Unfortunately, too many people on the side of firearms ownership make the same mistakes. Their position on the right to keep and bear arms is secondary to their position on politics, race, gender, or orientation. Seriously, once one group is denied freedom, it opens the door by precedent to deny other groups freedom. Most, if not all, of the basis for restricting guns is based on Jim Crow-era laws. Those laws were based on hate and unreasoning fear. The laws don't make things better, so just one more law and maybe then we'll be safe. Okay, we need to have another law to cover the things the last one didn't, then we'll be safe. So many terrible things that start by demeaning one group. Developing bad habits of thought turns into bad policy to support those thoughts. Let's get everyone's rights fully recognized and hash out other government policy somewhere else. I'm glad for my friends who disagree with my politics. We tend to agree on the important things in life. Have fun, be safe, and I hope I gave you something to think about.
Gosh, Xander, I have no idea where you're coming from. None at all.
I'll just again reiterate for the fans of the show that are listening that are of the traditional 2A group, the libertarians, the Republicans, the males, and all that. Just I can tell you, like we're not forgetting about you either. We're all in this together, and we've talked a bunch about like how it's getting close to a majority of states have constitutional carry. We're really making a lot of inroads, and we have strength in numbers. So the more numbers we get, the better we can be in this fight. So again, be cautious about your owning the libs and claiming that all Democrats are anti-gun and things like that. You know, doesn't mean you have to lie. We give credit where credit is due, but also I really want to roll out the red carpet for this new crop of pro-gun Democrats to come through and take over this old guard of gun grabbers, because I'd like to think, we'll see, time will tell, but I'm starting to think their days are numbered. I don't know how else it adds up.
Well, from your lips to God's ears, Weird.
If he's listening.
If he ever listens to a heathen like you.
That's right.
Oh no! Someone has been roughly handling David's tools. Learn who did what to whose what's it in this segment. And yes, Weird, I'm going to keep milking this damn double entendre for as long as I can.
Hi, and welcome to Gun Lovers and Other Strangers. Since it's been a while, it's time once again for another installment of Tales from the Armorer's Bench. First up is the sad tale of a much-loved high-standard Sentinel 22 revolver. It came in for a checkup due to some function issues. The culprit was a worn-out hand. Unfortunately, special jigs are needed for disassembly and reassembly of these older budget revolvers. Double unfortunately, those jigs no longer seem to exist. I had to regretfully tell the owner his revolver should be retired. We also recently had a few instances of people reassembling their guns incorrectly and coming to us for resolution. Two in particular stand out. Both were striker-fired semi-automatic pistols. With one, the customer had managed to get the slide back on with the barrel upside down. The barrel lug was actually protruding from the ejection port. A few gentle taps with a rubber mallet and the slide came off for proper reassembly. For the other, at least the barrel was right side up, but had been reassembled with the barrel too far forward in the slide, so that when the slide was in battery, the barrel protruded from the front of the slide about half an inch. Also, the slide lock lever was not in place. One of the managers tried to get the slide off, but couldn't quite get things lined up correctly. Thankfully, I was able to assist and got the issue straightened out. Next up are customer guns that fall into the poor thing category. One was a Charter Arms Undercover 38 Special revolver. On the service form, the condition was listed as nasty, and it was not wrong. This gun was so encrusted with dirt and debris that the model was listed as unknown. I was able to get it cleaned up fairly well and functioning, although there was considerable finish damage. The other was a 1961 vintage Winchester Model 50 semi-automatic 12-gauge shotgun. It's an interesting design that made use of the floating chamber concept of David Marshall Williams, better known for his work on the M1 carbine. It was in excellent mechanical condition, but it was pretty dirty and had a light coating of rust over most of the parts. Some patience and elbow grease brought it back from the edge. I've spoken of this issue before, but we had another AR come in with function problems. Once again, a free float tube had been added, the forward handguard plate had been removed, yet the gas block hadn't been replaced or repositioned. The resulting gas leak caused cycling problems. Thankfully, this is an easy problem to diagnose and resolve. We also had a Ruger Precision Rifle in .308 come in with a round jammed in the chamber. To clarify, it had a 7.62x54R round jammed in the chamber. This poor fellow also had suffered the worst Cerakote job I've ever seen. The drips and blobs on the outside were bad enough, but the same conditions existed on the inside as well, including the bolt raceway. I was able to get the round out of the chamber with no damage to the rifle, but there was little I could do for the rest. Speaking of Rugers, another disassembled Ruger Mark III was brought in for reassembly. This time, the bag of parts didn't include the magazine. Due to the magazine safety, never one of my favorite features on a gun, I had to borrow a magazine from the sales floor to get the gun back together. We don't only get Ruger 22 pistols showing up in need of reassembly. One day there was a gallon Ziploc bag of parts in the cabinet that turned out to be the receiver of a TC Contender pistol. Not only was it the stereotypical bag o' parts, not only were there some small parts missing, but there were some extra parts that didn't even belong to that gun. I did what I could and contacted the owner with a list of missing parts he needed to find or buy. Occasionally, we'll have customers drop off guns that we just can't help them with. One month I had a selection of Raven, Davis, Phoenix, Jimenez, Xander, Lorcan pistols come in for repair. In each case, I took a look and attempted to diagnose the issue. Then I mostly had to tell the owners that there was little I could do for them. I never enjoy those conversations. On a lighter note, there was an amusing situation with a range gun recently. The SIG 365 we have for rental came back for function issues. Turned out to be a broken slide lock spring. We ordered one from SIG and the gun was back in service fairly quickly. About a week or so later, it was back for repair again, this time for a broken trigger return spring. Luckily, I'd ordered a few of those previously, so that was no issue. Considering this 365 is probably the most rented handgun on the range, I'm not surprised that it's had some issues. Ending on a serious note. As I've said before, in addition to being reserved for child molesters and people who talk at the theater, I believe that a very special level of hell is reserved for anyone who damages another person's tools. I arrived at work recently to discover my last pistol cleaning rod left on my bench with the threaded end destroyed from being used to clear a barrel obstruction. I had to get the receiving clerk to cost one out from the sales floor just so I could do my job. I also found my rifle rod on the range bent and with a damaged tip. A few minutes with a file and straightening it in the vise made it functional, but I'm still not happy. I'm sure our listeners don't need to be told this, but please be respectful of other people's tools.
You're wearing my hat.
Fight for it.
If God was a villain, he'd be me.
That about wraps up this segment. If you have any questions for me or suggestions for future segments, please post them on the Assorted Calibers Podcast Facebook or MeWe pages, and Erin or Weird will make sure I get them. That's all for now. Thanks for listening. I'm David, and this is Gun Lovers and Other Strangers.
Okay, so I have a question. I didn't quite understand what was said, and I sent David a request, and I haven't heard back from him yet. But one of the first things he said was, the culprit was a worn-out... And the something, I swear to God, it sounded like ham. But that doesn't make any sense. Why would there be a worn-out ham in a revolver?
Oh, hand. So the hand is the little doohickey that goes out and engages the ratchet on the cylinder.
Okay. Doohickey. Got it. Thank you for the technical explanation.
I mean, it's called a hand, but yeah, it is the if you think about a traditional double action revolver with a swing out cylinder, right there in the center of the ejector star for most of them is a little ratchet set. And essentially if you look on the face, you'll see a little like vertical slot on the breech face of the gun, and there'll be a piece of metal that will come out and it will engage onto that ratcheting and advance it one place and advance the next chamber to the barrel.
Okay, I would have never thought to call it a hand. Flange is what I would have immediately gone for.
Well, if you look at it, it's like on a whole bunch of on the revolvers that I have, it is literally shaped like a hand. It's got a little paw on it. It's like spoon shaped. It's very much a hand.
Nevertheless, I must insist that we title this episode "Worn Out Ham."
that is true. I mean, the hams do get worn out, for they are so delicious. I don't know if David got a chance to talk to the owner of that Ruger precision rifle, but a 7.62 by 54R in the chamber. Yeah, they don't make one of those guns in that caliber, and that would explain why it got stuck. And I gotta wonder, first up, I'm impressed that they got it to fire, but also I gotta wonder how it happened. I wonder if it was in the situation like you see people shooting 50 BMG out of shotguns, and like if it fits, then we might as well shoot it. Or is it a case of, you often see this, especially with new shooters, they don't realize all that extra rigmarole behind it. It makes different stuff. So if it's in, say, 308 Winchester, so they know, okay, that's also 7.62, 7.62 by 50 something, and they see 7.62 by 54R, that looks like it. Or, we'll often see it with someone buying 9mm Makarov ammo for their 9mm Luger pistol, because 9mm, or maybe even finding a box, a European box of 9mm Kurtz. I've got a few. I've got a box of what is it, 6.35 Browning. In my on my gun shelf for my 25 ACP. I'm curious to know how that case got stuck in the chamber like it did.
Well, we may never know.
Mm-hmm. and the other question I've got is the number of people that had the Ring of Fire pistols, the Lorsons and the Ravens and such, bringing it into a gunsmith. Like, what do you think, the gunsmith's time is going to be free? Like, you probably paid $75 for that pistol when you bought it. What do you think they're going to charge to fix it?
Just throw it in the recycling and get another one.
I mean, yeah, we ended up buying a brand new dishwasher last year because it died and it was just dead. Like, there was no lights on, there was no nothing, no pushing buttons, no nothing, just no dishwashing. And so, like, all right, I can't even figure out what's going on. And it was a 13 or 14-year-old dishwasher. So we could call a repairman, and the repairman was probably going to charge like close to $200 just to have a look, not even to fix anything once he got there. And so, yeah, at what point in time are we spending, $500 on a dishwasher that might be like $1,000 and then it's old. So even if they do manage to fix it, it could just break again. Again, as David said, there's just a time when you say it's time for that gun to retire.
Yeah, the aphorism is throwing good money after bad. Or, if you're classy, the sunk cost fallacy. So weird. Do you know what else is as delicious, if not more delicious, than a worn-out ham?
What's that, Aaron?
Well, that would be our listeners, and especially our patrons. And so I want to wish a happy Horny Werewolf Day to all of our listeners.
Happy Horny Werewolf Day, Aaron.
Why, yes. Now, some of you folks may know it as St. Valentine's Day. But here's a little knowledge drop for you. The Feast of St. Valentine is where Christianity went and changed a pagan rite. And this particular pagan ritual was Roman, and it was called the Festival of Lupercalia. And it was part of a fertility rite where men would smear themselves with blood, dress up in animal skins, and run around the city whipping, not hard, but, ritually hitting young women with cords made of goat skin. And this festival was held between the 13th and the 15th of February to avert evil spirits and purify the city. So, yeah, it's a Horny Werewolf Day.
You know what? I have never been one for celebrating Valentine's Day, and thankfully my wife agrees with this. But you know what? That may come to a change. Why didn't Hallmark tell me about this? Well, there. Thank you to all our listeners, and I hope you are donning your furs now and acquiring your whips. We appreciate you listening to our show, and a very special thanks to all our supporters on Patreon. If you want to become a supporter on Patreon, go to patreon.com/AssortedCalibersPodcast to sign up. There's all sorts of great bonus stuff for you, such as early release of the podcast, but we also have blooper reels. We have the ACP film tracks where you can watch movies with members of the ACP staff, and the ACP Mag Dump.
Also, please remember to rate us on Apple Podcasts, subscribe to us on the platform of your choice, and share the show with your friends, both online and off.
You can get more from me at my blog, which is weirdworld.com, and you can hear me weekly on Handgun Radio on the Firearms Radio Network.
And you can find me at all the usual places. You know where I am. It's no big deal.
Aaron's a big deal. Aaron is a big deal.
Hey, Weird, does this podcast make my deal look big?
It makes your deal look huge. Positively gigantic. Aaron, your deal is too big for me.
Well, that's saying something.
And Nate Spencer is a very big deal as well, and he's the guy who does our music.
Well, I'm a brony, and as it turns out, Weird may be awakening to being a furry as he dresses as a werewolf for this evening, and perhaps a romantic rendezvous with Mrs. Weird. Our boudoir tastes are assorted, and so's our podcast. Good night, everybody.
Yiff, yiff, y'all.